She stood up slowly. The restaurant went quiet before she said a word. 47 minutes. That was how long she had been sitting at that table. Alone. Dressed like she had somewhere to be. Checking her phone like the answer was going to change. It didn't. And then he walked in. Not late. Not sorry. Not alone. The woman on his arm was laughing at something he had said in the parking lot. The laugh was still on her face when the door opened. Every table saw it. Nobody moved. She set down her glass. Both hands flat on the white tablecloth, shoulders back. And when she finally spoke, her voice did not shake. Not once. What she said next silenced the entire room. And the man sitting alone at table 7, the one she had never noticed, watched her become someone he had always known she was. Darius Webb had not planned on having company that night. He had planned on a steak, medium rare, maybe a glass of whatever the bartender recommended without him having to ask too many questions. He had planned on sitting at table 7 near the back wall, where nobody could see him from the entrance, and eating his dinner in the kind of quiet that did not require any performance from him. That was the plan. He was already on his second slice of bread and halfway through his water when he noticed her. The woman in the green dress. She was seated across the restaurant near the window that faced the street. The kind of window that turned everything outside into soft gold when the rain came down. She had her hands folded in her lap and her back straight, and she was looking at the door every 40 seconds or so with the precision of someone who had started counting without meaning to. Darius noticed the empty chair first, then the dress, deep green, fitted in a way that made every other woman in the room look like she had dressed in the dark. The fabric caught the low light of the restaurant and held it. Her hair was pressed flat and smooth, falling just past her jaw on both sides, not a strand out of place. She had the kind of face that belonged in a painting. Cheekbones that could cut glass. Eyes that were doing everything they could to look unbothered. They were not succeeding. He knew that face. He had known that face for 15 years, and in that time he had done absolutely nothing useful with that knowledge. Celeste Monroe. He said her name in his head the way people repeat a word until it stops sounding like a word. Celeste. Celeste Monroe. Still the same arrangement of syllables that used to tie his tongue into a square knot in the back of his throat every time she walked past him in the corridor between second and third period. She had been wearing a yellow jacket that day in the corridor. He remembered that specifically. Not because yellow was her color, though it was, but because he had been carrying a broken display case bracket, and she had stepped around him with a small apologetic smile and said sorry even though he was the one standing in the middle of the walkway like a traffic cone. He had thought about that sorry for approximately 3 weeks, which told you most of what you needed to know about Darius Webb at 17. He watched her check her phone now. The movement was practiced, deliberate, like she was trying to make it look casual when it was anything but. She set the phone back down face up on the table and smoothed the napkin in her lap and looked at the door again. Nobody came through it. Darius cut into his steak. He ate 2 bites. Looked up. She was checking her phone again. Her jaw was set at an angle that he recognized as the face a person made when they were deciding whether or not to cry in public, and landing firmly on not. He looked back down at his plate, ate another bite, looked up. She was still there, still alone, still smoothing that napkin like she could press the evening flat if she tried hard enough. He had no plan for this situation, he had no protocol. He was a man who repaired cracked display frames for a living and talked mostly to artifacts and the occasional security guard named Devon who brought him terrible coffee at 10 in the morning. He was not equipped for whatever this was. But he also could not look away. The waiter, a young man named Trevor with a nervous energy that suggested he had been working there for exactly 3 weeks, appeared at her table again. Darius could not hear what was said, but he saw the way her shoulders did that thing. That small particular collapse. Like the weight of the question had landed on the exact wrong spot. She smiled at Trevor. It was a real smile. Not the performed kind, the kind that cost something. Then she picked up her phone and looked at it and set it back down. 47 minutes. Darius did not know exactly how long she had been sitting there, but he knew from the look of her that it had been long enough to mean something. Long enough to feel the difference between late and not coming. Long enough to stop refreshing the hope. He should look away. He knew that. He was not the kind of man who stared. He had been raised by a woman who could communicate an entire chapter of disappointment with a single look across a dinner table, and one of the many things that look had taught him was that staring at people in their private pain was a particular kind of rudeness. He looked away, ate the rest of his steak, ordered coffee he did not need because the evening had started feeling like it required something hot, and then he heard the sound of a chair being pushed back. He looked up. Celeste Monroe was standing. Her dress caught the light again as she turned. She scanned the room once, the way people do when they are looking for an exit that does not require them to walk past too many witnesses. Her eyes moved across the bar, the couple by the door, the older gentleman reading a newspaper near the hostess stand, and then they landed on Darius. He stopped breathing for approximately 1 second. She looked at him for long enough that he felt it. Not recognition, not yet. Something else first. She was reading him the way people read a room when they need to find the safest corner in it, when they need to locate the one face that is not going to make everything worse. She picked up her purse. She walked toward him. Darius had exactly the length of time it took her to cross a restaurant to decide what to do with his face, his hands, and the entirely unreasonable fact that Celeste Monroe was walking in his direction, with her chin lifted and her eyes dry, and something in her expression that was not quite fragile but was very close to the edge of it. She stopped at his table. He stood up. Reflex. His mother had built that one in early and it had never left. She said quietly enough that only he could hear, "I'm sorry to bother you. Can I sit here?" Not because she remembered him. He understood that immediately. She was not asking him because she knew who he was. She was asking him because of the way he had been looking at her. Or rather, the way he had not been looking at her. Every other person in that restaurant had been watching Celeste Monroe the way people watch an accident with the sound off, with that particular mixture of sympathy and fascination that was worse, in its own way, than just staring outright. Darius had been looking at his steak. That was apparently enough. "Please," he said. And then, because he had been raised right, he pulled the chair out. She sat down. Up close she was even more the same. Which made no sense as a thought, but there it was. He had been 15 years, and a full life away from the version of her he knew, and yet something about the angle of her jaw, and the careful way she folded her hands on the table edge, was exactly the same as the girl who used to sit 2 rows ahead of him in history class, and take notes in different colors of ink. She smelled like something warm. Vanilla. Rain. The particular combination of a person who had gotten caught in the weather and was pretending she was fine with it. "Hi," she said. Her voice was steady, almost high. She looked down at the table, then up at him. Then she said, "I don't remember your name. I'm sorry. I recognize your face, but I can't." "Darius," he said. "We went to school together." Something shifted behind her eyes. Not full recognition. The beginning of it. "Webb," she said slowly. "You used to fix things, still do. The display in the front hallway, by the principal's office. Something was always broken and you always had tape. The tape was rated for industrial use," he said. "I want that on record." A small sound came out of her. Not quite a laugh, but something in that neighborhood. "I'm Celeste," she said. "I know." She looked at him. He felt he needed to explain that before it became strange. "We had history together junior year. And biology. You sat in front of me both times. You took notes in different colored pens. Blue for dates, green for names, red for things that would be on the test. You once lent me a red pen when mine died and apologized like you were handing me something that cost you personally. It was a nice pen." This time the sound was more like a laugh. It lasted about 1 second and then faded, and her eyes went toward the door. He followed her gaze. Nobody was coming through it. Trevor appeared at the table with the hovering energy of a person who had been watching the situation from across the room and had not yet figured out what the appropriate thing to do was. "Ma'am," he said, and his voice had that careful register of a waiter who had been trained to solve problems, but was not sure this was a problem a waiter could solve. "Should I keep the other place?" "We're good," Darius said. Easy, like it was a fact and not an intervention. He smiled at Trevor with the specific calm of a man who had spent years managing situations involving 400-pound artifacts and anxious museum directors. "Could you bring her whatever she was drinking? And maybe just pretend this is a completely normal evening?" Trevor blinked. Then he straightened like he had been given a mission. "Absolutely, sir." He disappeared. Celeste was looking at Darius with an expression he could not entirely read. Something between gratitude and the particular exhaustion of someone who had been managing their own dignity all night and was suddenly, unexpectedly, not alone in that work. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know." He was going to ask about the place setting he was. That would have been. She stopped, pressed her lips together. A lot, it would have been. She looked down at the table. Her hands were flat against the white tablecloth now, fingers spread, like she was checking whether the surface was real. "I've been sitting here for 47 minutes, she said. The number fell out of her mouth like she had been holding it for a while, and it had finally gotten too heavy. "I know that because I counted, which is the part I'm most embarrassed about." Darius did not say anything about that. Some things deserved to just be said without being responded to right away. "He texted at 43 minutes, she continued. "Something came up, that's all. 3 words. Not even punctuation. Still nothing from him. He just waited. I told the waiter twice that he was on his way." She was not looking at him. She was looking at the spot on the tablecloth between her hands. "I smiled at strangers because I was afraid if I didn't, I would look pathetic. I reapplied my lipstick in the bathroom at minute 30 because I thought if I looked put together enough, maybe I could make myself believe it was fine." She looked up. "It's not fine." "No," Darius agreed. "It isn't. But I also cannot stand up and leave right now." "Why not?" "Because if I walk from this table to that door, I become a story at every table between here and the exit. The woman in the green dress who got left, and I cannot." She stopped, swallowed. "I cannot be that story tonight." Darius looked around the restaurant once. There were about 12 tables occupied. Half of them had at least one person angled in Celeste's general direction, in the way that people did when they were watching something and trying not to be seen doing it. He looked back at her. "You're not that story," he said. "You're having dinner with an old friend." "We're not really old friends, no. We're not." He paused. "But we could be, if that helps." She studied him for a moment. The kind of looking that was actually an evaluation, not unkind, just careful, like she was checking the weight of the thing before picking it up. "Does that work for you?" she asked. "Being drafted into emotional support at dinner without any warning?" "I work around artifacts that haven't been touched in 100 years, and I still treat them carefully," he said. "I have patience." Something in her face did a complicated thing. Not quite a smile. "That's a strange comparison," she said. "It is. I'm sorry." "Don't be. It's the nicest thing anyone said to me in." She paused. "I'm not going to finish that sentence because the ending is depressing." Trevor returned with a glass of white wine and set it down with the delicacy of a person diffusing something. He looked between them once, nodded, and left without a word. Darius noted that his opinion of Trevor had improved considerably. Celeste wrapped both hands around the stem of the glass. She didn't drink, just held it. "Darius Webb," she said, like she was testing the name out. "You fix things. You were quiet. You always looked like you were working something out in your head that was too complicated to say out loud." He looked at the table. "Still do. I remember you built something for one of the school events. A structure. I don't remember what it was. Winter formal. It was supposed to be a snow scene. I built an archway out of PVC and foam board and spent 11 hours painting it to look like ice." She frowned. "I don't remember an archway. It collapsed 20 minutes before the event. I rebuilt it with what I had, which was duct tape and the kind of hope that only 17-year-olds have." She looked at him. "Did it hold?" "Long enough for the photos. Then Principal Haney leaned against it, and we all had to pretend it was supposed to do that." This time the laugh was real. It lasted longer than a second. It changed her face completely. Not the careful pretty of someone performing composure. Just her face laughing. And it was exactly as devastating as Darius remembered from the hallway outside history class in the 11th grade. He had not been prepared for it then. He was not prepared for it now. Then her eyes went to the door, and Darius watched her face change again. The laugh didn't drain so much as get replaced. Like a channel switching. 1 second she was there, present, almost easy. The next second every muscle between her eyebrows and her jaw made a small calculation. Darius turned. The man who walked through the door of Marlowe's did not look like someone who had been held up by a work emergency. He was not rumpled or apologetic or arriving at the breathless pace of a person who knew they had done something wrong. He was in a jacket the color of dark slate, and he walked with the loose ease of someone who had not been counting minutes. He had a woman on his arm. She was in a red dress, and she was laughing at something he had said before they came through the door, and the laugh was still on her face as the hostess moved to greet them. Reeve Cole. Darius did not know the name yet. He would learn it in about 3 minutes. But right now he just saw the shape of the situation with the clarity of someone who spent his professional life reading damage. He looked back at Celeste. She was looking at them. Her wine glass was still in both hands and her knuckles had gone tight. Her expression had not collapsed. It had not crumpled or flinched or done any of the things a person's face did when they were surprised by pain. Because she was not surprised. She had suspected at 43 minutes. The text had confirmed it. And now here was the confirmation of the confirmation. She turned her face back to Darius. "That's him," she said. The 2 words were very even. Darius said nothing. Waited. Reeve Cole. She set the wine glass down with the same careful deliberateness with which she had smoothed her napkin all evening. "We matched 2 weeks ago. He chose this restaurant. He told me he might be late because of a work call." Darius looked back at Reeve, at the woman in red, at the ease of his posture and the way he had not yet scanned the room to see if she was still there. "Work call looks comfortable," Darius said. Something came out of her nose, not quite a laugh but in the family. "Don't make me laugh," she said. "I will either cry or make a sound that is not appropriate for a nice restaurant. I'll try to be less funny." She looked at the table, then she looked up at him, and what was in her eyes was not grief exactly. It was the look of someone who had packed for a journey they did not want to take, and was now standing at the door of it. "Darius," she said quietly, "would you do something for me?" Not a question, almost. "What do you need?" he said. She looked past him for a moment. Reeve had seen her now. Darius could tell because the easy posture changed. Just slightly. The calculation of a person who has been caught at something, and is deciding in real time how to manage the catch. Celeste looked back at Darius. "Please," she said. "Just for a minute, be here. I am here, I mean." She stopped, took a breath. Then she reached across the table and put her hand over his. Her fingers were cold. Not fragile cold. The kind of cold that built up over 47 minutes of sitting alone and pretending everything was fine. "I mean, be here." For 1 second, Darius forgot everything. His hands, his name, the coffee going cold on his right. The fact that he had spent 15 years being quietly useful without being noticed by precisely this person. Then he turned his hand over and held hers. "Okay," he said. He did not squeeze. Did not perform. Did not become the kind of man who turns someone else's bad evening into an opportunity. He just stayed. Reeve reached their table. He stopped beside it. He had the unhurried confidence of a man who was used to arriving places and having them adjust to him. The woman in the red dress stood half a step behind, and Darius could see from her expression that she was only now beginning to understand the geometry of what she had walked into. "Celeste," Reeve said. "Reeve." Her voice was completely level. His eyes moved to their joined hands, then to Darius. The look he gave Darius was the particular look that men in expensive jackets gave to men in good but not expensive jackets when they were trying to establish a hierarchy through eye contact alone. Darius looked back at him without particular emotion. "And you are," Reeve said, smoothed out to almost a question, "Darius Webb." He did not add anything. No title, no context, no explanation of why he was sitting there with Celeste Monroe's hand in his. Reeve waited. No further information arrived. "We know each other," Celeste said, and there was something in the simplicity of it that was more precise than any elaborate story would have been. "We reconnected tonight." The woman in the red dress had gone quiet behind him. Darius could see her recalculating. Reeve cleared his throat. "I texted you." "You did," Celeste said. "Something came up." "I understood. It was a work thing, it ran over." The woman in red looked at him then. A look Darius recognized. The look of a person who has just heard a version of a story that does not match the one they were given. Reeve felt it. He said her name once, a short warning. She ignored it. She looked at Celeste and her face did something unexpected. It opened. Just slightly. The expression of a person who had also just had a geometry problem resolve itself and did not like the answer. "I'm sorry," she said, to Celeste. Celeste blinked. Those were apparently not the words she had been prepared for. "He told me he was meeting clients," the woman said. Her voice was quieter now. "Before dinner." Reeve said her name again. Harder this time. "Don't," she said, without looking at him. She looked at Celeste for another moment. Then she picked up her clutch from under her arm and walked toward the exit. Reeves stood at their table for approximately 4 seconds, with the expression of a man watching his entire evening dissolve, and trying to decide which direction to go. Then he looked at Celeste. "You didn't have to make this a whole thing," he said. The table went quiet. Not just their table. The 3 tables nearest them went quiet too. Celeste looked at Reeve Cole. She looked at him the way she had been looking at his empty chair all evening, like she was seeing him clearly now in a way that required no further adjustment. She stood up, she stood slowly. She smoothed the front of her green dress with both palms. She was not shaking. Or rather, she was shaking and had decided it didn't matter. "I sat here for 47 minutes, she said. Her voice was low, clear. It did not waver. "I checked my phone 13 times. I told the waiter twice that you were on your way. I smiled at people I didn't know because I was afraid if I didn't, I would look like exactly what I was. A woman sitting alone on a Friday night who wanted to believe somebody was coming." She stopped, let one breath out. "Then you walked in with someone else. And now you're standing at my table telling me I made this a whole thing." Reeve opened his mouth. "I'm not making this dramatic," she said, before whatever he was going to say could land. "I'm refusing to be invisible." No one in the immediate vicinity was pretending to look somewhere else anymore. Reeve Cole adjusted his jacket. It was the movement of a man who did not have a response that was going to serve him here and knew it. He looked at Darius once more, the way people look at witnesses when they would prefer not to have any. Then he turned and left the restaurant without another word. The room exhaled. Celeste stood for a moment. 1 second, 2. Then she sat back down as if her bones had rearranged themselves while she was standing and were still finding their new positions. Darius moved her water glass closer to her without saying anything. She looked at it, then at him. Her eyes were bright but dry. "Did I just do that?" she said. Not a question. She glanced around and, "Everyone. Most of them are now on your side. My knees are completely divorced from my body right now. That's adrenaline. That's a generous name for it." She picked up the water glass. Drank. "Set it down. I have never done that, I know. You don't know me well enough to know that. I know that the woman who once apologized to me for needing to borrow a red pen did not have a history of confronting people publicly." She looked at him. Something in her face went soft around the edges. Not sad. Careful. Like she was approaching something she wasn't sure about. "You really remembered that," she said. "I remembered a lot of things," he said. "You don't have to do anything with that information." She studied him for a long moment. Long enough that Trevor materialized at the table with the instinct of a person who could tell when a pause needed something in it. "On the house," he said, and refilled her wine glass before she could respond. She looked up at him. "Thank you, Trevor." He straightened the way people do when their name is said by someone who means it. "Of course." He disappeared again. Celeste turned the wine glass slowly in her hands. Outside the window, the street was wet and the lights of passing cars bled into each other in long gold smears. Inside, the restaurant had started breathing again. Conversations resuming, silverware clinking, the piano near the bar shifting into something slower. "I want to leave," she said. "But I also don't want him to decide how this night ends." "Then don't let him." Easy to say. "Not really," he admitted. She looked at him again. The careful look. Like she was reading the weight of something for the second time. "Why are you being this kind to me?" she said. "You don't owe me anything." Darius considered the question seriously, the way he considered most things. "I'm not being kind as a favor," he said. "I just don't think you should have to sit alone. I was alone when you got here. You're not alone now." She held his gaze for a moment. Then she looked down at the table between them. Their hands were no longer touching, but they were close. Close enough that the absence was its own kind of presence. Then her phone lit up. The name on the screen was not Reeve Cole. It was 2 words. Solomon Price. Not a text. A call. Celeste looked at the screen. She went very still. Not the stillness of surprise. The stillness of a person who has heard a sound they recognize and are deciding whether to let it in. She declined the call. Then she set the phone face down on the table. Darius watched her hands. Both of them pressed flat against the tablecloth. "Darius," she said. Her voice was smaller now than it had been when she was standing and facing Reeve Cole down in front of a room full of strangers. Smaller and older somehow, like it came from somewhere further back. "I don't think I can go home yet." He did not ask who Solomon Price was. He did not ask why the name on a phone screen could do to her in 2 seconds what 47 minutes of waiting and public humiliation had not quite managed. He just said, "Okay." One word, set down between them like a hand reaching out in the dark. Not dramatic, not performing rescue, just there. Celeste looked at him. Her eyes were full now, not spilling over but full. "Okay," she said back, quietly. And outside the rain came back, soft against the windows. And inside Marlowe's the piano played something slow. And at table 7 near the back wall a man who had come in for a quiet dinner and left the kind of life that did not require being noticed, sat across from the woman he had never stopped noticing, and neither of them moved toward the door. The cafe was called Bellwether, and it had no business being open at this hour. That was the first thing Darius thought when they walked in. It was past 10 on a Friday night, and the place looked like it had been designed by someone who believed that mismatched lamps and fogged windows were a form of therapy. Which maybe they were. The ceiling was low, the chairs did not match. There were 2 nurses in a corner booth sharing a basket of fries and a conversation that had the rhythm of people who had been talking for hours and still had more to say. It was ordinary in a way that felt like exhaling. Celeste chose a table near the back, not the darkest corner, but close. The kind of seat where you could see the door without having to turn your head all the way around. Darius noticed. She noticed him noticing. Neither of them said anything about it. A college student with elaborate braids piled high on her head took their order without looking up from the tablet in her hand. Chamomile tea for Celeste. Coffee for Darius. He did not need the coffee, he ordered it because his hands needed somewhere to go. Celeste wrapped both hands around her mug before the tea was even fully steeped, like the warmth was the point and the tea was secondary. Outside the rain had settled into something gentler, not the sharp rain of earlier. The kind that whispered against glass instead of hitting it. For a while, neither of them spoke. Not because there was nothing to say. Because there was too much and neither of them knew which end of it to pick up first. The cafe moved around them, soft clinking. The low hum of refrigeration. The nurses laughing at something that did not carry across the room. Then Celeste said, "His name is Solomon Price." She did not look up when she said it. She was looking at the surface of her tea, watching the small movements on the water like she was reading something there. Darius waited. "We were married for 4 years," she said. "Divorced 2 years ago. And I want to be clear about something before I say anything else." She looked up. "He never hit me. Never raised his voice in a way that would look bad from the outside. Never did anything that anyone watching would have been able to point to and name." "Okay," Darius said. "I want to be clear about that, because when I tell you what he did do, I don't want you to think I'm exaggerating. I've been told I exaggerate enough times that I now lead with the disclaimer." Something tightened in Darius's chest. He kept his face steady. "You don't need the disclaimer," he said. She looked at him, measuring. Then she nodded once and filed it away. "He made me feel excessive," she said. "That's the word that fits best. Excessive. If I was happy, he'd ask why I was performing. If I was sad, he'd say I was looking for attention. If I wanted affection, he'd call it neediness. If I was quiet, he'd say I was punishing him." She stopped, turned the mug slowly in her hands. "After a while I started apologizing before I entered rooms. Not because he told me to. Because I had learned to make myself smaller before he got the chance to do it for me." The cafe held them, soft and unhurried. "The divorce was my idea," she said, which surprised him. "I think he expected me to stay because I had stopped believing I had other options." A pause. He was mostly right. I almost did stay. But I had a student that year. She had a stutter that nobody had been able to reach. And one afternoon she stood up in the middle of our session and said what she meant clearly for the first time. Not perfect, but clear. She looked at the window. Rain on the glass. Long, slow trails of it. I drove home that evening thinking about what it cost her to do that. And I thought, I cannot keep telling other people their voice matters if I don't believe mine does. Darius set down his coffee. "You left because of that," he said. "I left because of that. That's not a small thing." "No." She smiled. "Just briefly. It isn't." Her phone was on the table between them, face down. It had been face down since the restaurant. She had placed it there with the deliberateness of someone managing something that required management. "He calls," she said. "After my dates. I don't know how he always knows. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he just calls when he senses I might be close to feeling okay about something." She paused. "He has a sense for that window." Darius looked at the phone. "May I?" he said. She looked at him. He nodded toward the phone. Just slightly. She hesitated, then she slid it across the table. He did not pick it up, he did not look at it. He moved it further to the side, out of her direct eye line, and left his hand near it so it was covered without being hidden. Her shoulders dropped half an inch. "Thank you," she said quietly. There was a voicemail notification on the screen. He had seen it when she slid the phone across. She had seen him see it. "I should listen," she said. "If I don't, I'll imagine worse. Do you want private fast? Then softer. Would you stay? I'm right here." She reached over and retrieved the phone, pulled up the voicemail, held it between them on low volume, like they were sharing something small and not entirely safe. Solomon Price's voice came through the speaker. It was a good voice. That was the first thing. Smooth and measured and carrying the confidence of a man who had never been told he was too much of anything. There was warmth in it. Surface warmth. The kind that covered the temperature underneath. "Celeste, I heard you were at Marlowe's tonight." A brief pause. Not apologetic. Considering. "I hope you're not making another impulsive decision. You always confuse attention with real connection. You know that. Call me before you embarrass yourself again." The message ended. The cafe was too bright after it. Celeste stared at the phone. Her thumb was still on the screen. Then she laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because sometimes the body chose the wrong exit and laughter came out, instead of whatever it was actually trying to release. "There he is," she said. "Right on time." Darius looked at her. "Can I say something unkind about Solomon Price?" he said. "Please. He sounds like a man who mistakes control for intelligence." She blinked. Then the laugh that came out of her was startled and real and entirely different from the one before it. "That is very specific," she said. "I've worked with cracked display cases for 11 years. You learn to recognize pressure damage." She laughed harder, and then tears came with it. Not dramatic tears. The kind that showed up when the laughter opened a door that had been held shut. She pressed the back of her hand to her eye. "Pressure damage," she said. "You're not damaged," he said quickly. "That's not what I meant." "I know what you meant." She lowered her hand, looked at him. Her expression had changed, still carrying everything from the evening, but clearer, like something had been wiped from the lens. "That's the difference, you know." "What is?" "You correct yourself when something might land wrong." She turned the mug in her hands again. He never corrected himself. He would say something sharp and then look at me like I was unreasonable for feeling it. Darius did not know what to do with that except tell the truth. "I don't want to hurt you," he said. "I believe you," she said. Those 3 words were almost too much, for different reasons than she probably knew. The nurses in the corner paid their bill and left. The student with the braids began stacking chairs at the far end of the room. The cafe was winding down around them, gentle and unhurried, like it had decided they could stay as long as they needed. "I should tell you something," Darius said. "And I want to say it the right way so it doesn't land wrong." She looked at him, waiting. "I had a crush on you," he said. "Back then, in school." He held her gaze. "I'm telling you that now because I want you to understand what I am in this situation. And I'm not going to let what I want make me careless with what you need. Those are 2 different things, and I know they're 2 different things." Celeste went very still. "You liked me," she said, "for 3 years. Quietly. Which you probably couldn't have noticed because I was not forthcoming about it. You looked at me," she said slowly, "like I was a stained glass window." His neck went warm. "That sounds clinical. It sounds like you were paying attention." She tilted her head. "I noticed you noticing, I just didn't know what to do with it." He looked at the table. "You were with someone," he said. "I was with someone who asked first," she said. And there was something in that, something she was working through even as she said it. They sat with that for a moment. "I don't want you to feel cornered," he said, "by what I just told you. Tonight has been a lot and I don't want to add to it." "You're not adding to it." She looked at him steadily. "You're the only part of tonight that has felt like solid ground." The student called out that they were closing in 10 minutes. Celeste looked at the clock on the wall, genuinely surprised. 2 hours had moved past them like weather. Outside, the rain had stopped. The street shone under the lamps in long, wet reflections. At her car, she stopped before getting in. Turned back. "There was an exhibition," she said, "at the History Museum. I went when I was 22. The one about community portraits, local photographers, archival prints." Darius went very still. "I was there," he said. She stared at him. "You were working there." "I had just started. 3rd week on the job." I was hanging prints in the east corridor. I walked through that corridor. I know. He looked at her. I saw you. You stopped in front of a photograph of a woman laughing on a porch and you stood there for a long time. Celeste did not say anything for a moment. I remember that photograph, she said softly. I didn't say anything to you that day either, he said. And there it was, just out in the air between them. I've been not saying things to you for a long time. She looked at him. Her expression did something complicated. Maybe we're finally in the right conversation, she said. Maybe. She smiled. Small but real. Then she got in her car and drove away, and Darius stood in the parking lot for a moment listening to the sound of the city after rain. That was a Friday. The following Wednesday they met for coffee. Not because they had planned it precisely, because she had texted him Tuesday night and said she had been thinking about what he said in the parking lot. And he had said he had been thinking about it too, and she had said coffee tomorrow, and he had said yes before she finished the sentence. It was a different place from Bellwether. Brighter. More foot traffic. Nothing waited about it. They sat at a table near the window and ordered the same thing they had ordered the night before and talked about ordinary things for almost an hour. Her students. His work. Devon's ongoing feud with the building's thermostat, which had escalated to Devon, leaving a handwritten note on the control panel that Darius had photographed and kept as evidence of something he had not yet determined. Evidence of what? Celeste said. I don't know yet, but it felt important to document. She pointed her spoon at him. That's very curator of you. I'm a conservationist. What's the difference? About 40 minutes of explanation that would put you to sleep. She laughed. And Darius decided quietly, without making it a project, that he would learn every way to make her do that. On their second coffee meeting, she told him about a student she had been working with for almost a year. A young man, mid-20s, who had a specific consonant cluster that had never resolved correctly. She described the afternoon he produced it without prompting. The way his face went through 6 separate emotions in about 2 seconds before landing somewhere between disbelief and joy. That's what I do, she said. I help people find sounds that got stuck. Sounds that got stuck, Darius repeated. Between what they mean and what comes out. She looked at her coffee cup. Solomon used to say my work was supplementary, that I wasn't a real educator. Darius put his cup down. He said that. He said things like that. The kind of thing that was just close enough to a real critique that you couldn't call it what it was. What was it? Small, she said. It was just small. He looked at her. Your work is not small, he said. She met his eyes. Something moved across her face. Not surprise exactly. The expression of a person who has been waiting for a thing to be confirmed and is not yet sure whether to believe it. Thank you, she said. Quietly. They were careful with each other. That was the word for it. He never pushed. She never asked for more than she could carry. When he reached the end of a sentence that might mean something, he let it end without pressing. When she pulled back slightly, went quieter, he did not go after her. Just left the door open. He was good at waiting. He had been doing it for years without knowing that was what it was. What he did not know, and would not know for another week, was what happened at 11 at night, when her apartment was quiet. What she did in that particular silence after a day of being okay. She read his messages. Not Darius's messages. Solomon's. She did not respond. She had not responded since the week the divorce was finalized, almost 2 years ago. But she opened them. Every time. Some of them more than once. There were 67 of them spread across those 2 years, and she had read every single one and kept every single one, and she could not have explained why, except that deleting them felt like doing something that could not be undone. And she was still not entirely sure, in the part of herself that Solomon had spent 4 years renovating, who was right about her. She knew that was his voice. She knew that in her head. Her body had not fully received the information. Darius found out the week after their second coffee meeting. Not because she told him. Because he noticed the way she worded things. He had started showing her parts of the museum after hours. Not all of it. Just the pieces he thought she would stop in front of. The photographs. The handwritten letters behind glass. The exhibit on community memory that he had spent 3 months building the framing for. She had started coming by on Thursdays when her afternoon sessions ran long, and she needed to come back to herself before going home. She stopped in front of a letter one evening. 19th century. A woman writing to her sister. The handwriting was small and tilted, like the writer had been leaning away from something while composing it. Celeste read it for a long time. She apologizes 3 times in the first paragraph, she said. I noticed that, Darius said. For taking up her sister's time. For writing when she had no better news. For her feelings. She paused. I used to do that, he waited. Not wanting to interrupt whatever she was finding her way toward. I still do it sometimes, she said. More quietly. I start a sentence, and by the time I reach the end of it, I've already added the apology. He heard it then. In the way she had just described herself. Past tense and present tense at the same time. The woman who had left 2 years ago and the woman who was still, in certain rooms, in certain lights, turning the knob and finding it locked from the inside. He did not say it out loud. He filed it away with the kind of care he gave artifacts that were stable but fragile. Things that needed no intervention. Only attention. But he understood then that the 67 messages she had never mentioned but had never deleted were still somewhere on her phone. And that some morning she probably woke up and checked them the way people checked old wounds. Not to reopen them. Just to confirm they were still there. He did not ask. He would wait until she was ready to say it. And he would make sure that when she got there, she found no judgment waiting for her. He made himself think about something else. He was not always successful. There was a Thursday in the 3rd week when she arrived at the museum quieter than usual. Not cold. Just turned down. The way a radio went when someone had touched the dial. She stood in front of the community portraits exhibit for a long time without saying anything. Then she said, he texted this morning. Solomon. From a number I didn't recognize, so it came through. Darius stood beside her. He did not look at her. Let her say it to the photographs if that was easier. He said he had been thinking about me. That he hoped I was doing well, that he worried sometimes. She paused. It was a perfectly reasonable text. The kind that anyone reading it would think was kind. But Darius said, but it came at 7:48 in the morning, which is the exact time my first session starts, which he knew, which he still knows. She stopped. It wasn't about hoping I was well. It was about reminding me he knows my schedule. Darius was quiet for a moment. You don't have to respond, he said. I know that in my brain, she said. My hands are less convinced. He looked at her then. At her hands in particular. They were still. Folded in front of her. But he could see the effort in them. What would it cost you, he said carefully, to not respond? She thought about it. Actually thought about it. Nothing real, she said finally. Just the noise. What noise? The voice that says ignoring it is a choice I'll regret. That he was actually being kind and I'm being paranoid. That I'm reading into it. She looked at her hands, his voice. But in my mouth, and there it was. Said plainly. Out loud. In a museum corridor in front of a photograph of a woman who had also known what it was to carry someone else's conclusions around in your own chest. Darius looked at her for a long moment. That voice, he said, has been wrong about you before. She looked up at him. Every time, she said, and she sounded slightly surprised. Like she had known it but had not said it out loud until right now, and the saying of it made it land differently. She put her phone in her bag. Did not look at it again for the rest of the evening. Darius noted that. Filed it with the other things he was learning. The way she processed things. The distance between knowing something and being able to act on it. The courage it took, for her, to do something that other people did without thinking. The following week he picked her up after work. They had plans for dinner. A place she liked with good bread and a corner table away from the draft. He was in the parking lot early, because he was always early, and he had long ago stopped pretending otherwise. He could see through the glass doors of the main entrance. A man was in the lobby. Tall. Well-dressed in the way that looked easy but had been assembled carefully. He was speaking to someone at the front desk, and whatever he was saying was working because the woman there was nodding and smiling in the way people did when they were being handled by someone practiced at it. Darius watched. Then Celeste came down the corridor. She stopped when she saw the man. One step faltered, just one. Then she kept walking. He could not hear what was said. He watched from the parking lot the way he watched things he could not intervene in steadily, without looking away. The man smiled the whole time. Celeste did not, but she did not leave either. She stood with her arms at her sides and her face doing the thing Darius had come to recognize. The managed version. The composed version. The version that cost something to maintain. Then the man leaned in, said something meant only for her. Her chin dropped half an inch. He stepped back, nodded at the woman at the front desk. walked out through the glass doors without glancing toward the parking lot. Darius stayed in his car. He stayed until Celeste came through the doors with her bag on her shoulder and her keys in her hand. She walked to his car. Got in. Hi, she said. Hi. A beat. That was Solomon, she said. I figured. She looked straight ahead through the windshield. He said he was in the neighborhood. He said he just wanted to check in. Her voice was careful, the way it was when she was reconstructing something from memory and trying to be accurate about it. He said, I always do this. Get comfortable with new people. Rush into things, set myself up. What did you say? Nothing, thin. I stood there and let him finish, and then he left and I did nothing. Darius held himself still. He had a list of things he wanted to say about Solomon Price. None of them kind. All of them probably accurate. And none of them what she needed in this specific moment. I think we skip dinner tonight, he said instead. She looked at him. Not skip it, he said. Change it. We can go somewhere easier. Drive through. Eat in the car. Whatever sounds like less. She looked at him for a moment. Then she said, there's a place on Meridian that has good sweet potato fries. Let's go there. You don't have to want the fries, he said. Simply. Show me where. She almost smiled. Gave him directions. They ended up parked outside the place on Meridian with the windows down and the evening coming in. She ate her fries. He ate his. The radio was on low, some station neither of them had chosen deliberately, playing things from 10 years ago that neither of them had thought about in 10 years. After a while she said, I still have his messages on my phone. Darius did not move. All of them, she said. Going back almost 2 years. From the week after the divorce was final. She turned to look at him. Her eyes clear, direct, doing him the courtesy of not flinching from what she was saying. I don't answer. I haven't answered once, but I read them. Every time he sends one. And I go back sometimes and read the old ones too. She stopped. I know why I kept them at the beginning, she said. I told myself it was because deleting them felt permanent. But I think. She paused, then said it plainly. I think I kept them because part of me was waiting to find out if he was right about me. The car was quiet. Outside the Meridian street moved with its ordinary evening business. A couple walking a dog. A man on his phone, a bus pulling away from the stop on the corner. Darius turned in his seat to face her. Can I tell you what I see, he said. She nodded. Small. I see a woman who helps people find their voice for a living, he said. Who watched a student find hers and used that as the reason to find her own. Who sat alone in a restaurant for 47 minutes, and then stood up in front of a room full of strangers and told a man who had disrespected her exactly what she saw, without cruelty, without falling apart, with complete accuracy. He stopped, then quieter. That is not a woman who is too much. That is a woman who has been told she is too much by someone who needed her to be less so he could feel like more. She was looking at him. Her eyes were full. Not spilling, full. Darius, she said. You don't have to do anything with that, he said. It's just what I see. She turned back toward the windshield. One tear moved down her cheek before she caught it. She pressed the heel of her hand there and held it. They sat in the car until the light changed, and the evening went the color of something that had decided to be done for the day. She ate the rest of her fries. He finished his. The radio kept playing things from 10 years ago that felt different now than they had then. I went to that exhibition, she said eventually. The community portraits one. At the museum. I know, you said you saw me there. In the East Corridor. You stopped in front of a portrait for a long time. I didn't know you were there, she said. I know. Were you going to say anything to me? I thought about it. But you were somewhere else in your head, he said. It felt wrong to interrupt that. She looked at him. What were you doing? Hanging prints. 3rd week on the job. There was one in the East Corridor with a slightly off-center mount, and I had been deciding whether to rehang it or leave it. Which did you do? Rehung it. Took 40 minutes. I was late getting home. She smiled at the windshield. You spent 40 minutes making something right when no one else would have noticed. Someone might have noticed. I think I would have, she said quietly, and that went somewhere in him and stayed. He drove her home. She got out of the car, then turned back. Thank you, she said. For what? For not trying to fix what happened today. For just changing the shape of the evening instead. He looked at her. The fries helped. The fries helped, she agreed. She went inside. He waited until her light came on in the 2nd floor window. Then he drove home. He thought about what she had said. About the messages. About waiting to find out if Solomon was right about her. He thought about the letter in the museum corridor, the woman who apologized 3 times in the first paragraph. He thought about Celeste, standing in the lobby with her chin dropping half an inch. He went home and sat at his workbench and picked up a pencil. He did not plan what he was going to draw. He just drew her from memory, the East Corridor. The way she had looked standing in front of a portrait of someone else's life, taking it seriously, giving it her full attention, the distance he had kept between them, the doorway framing her without her knowing. He drew it as honestly as he could. The distance was in it. He was not in it. Just her framed by a corridor she had not known anyone was watching her from. He looked at it for a while. Then he found an envelope. 3 days later she did not text. He told himself that was fine. People had lives, things came up. 3 days was nothing. 4 days. He sent one message on day 2. Simple. Checking in, no pressure on the other end of it. She did not reply. 5 days. He did not call. Did not text again. Did not drive to her apartment or past her workplace, or do any of the things that crossed his mind and that he dismissed one by one because he was not that man and would not become one for anyone, regardless of how loud the silence had gotten. On the evening of day 5 he went back to his workbench. He looked at the drawing. He had been not saying things to her for a long time. He had said that to her in the parking lot outside Bellwether, and she had said maybe we're finally in the right conversation, and he had believed that. He still believed it. But belief did not fill 5 days of silence. He found the envelope again, put the drawing inside, and on the back of the single sheet of paper 4 words, "I'm still here." He drove to her apartment. He did not knock. He did not sit outside waiting. He placed the envelope at her door and left and drove home and did not check his phone every 10 minutes because he had some dignity, and also because he checked it every 15, which was close enough. He did not sleep well, but he slept. Because he had told the truth. He had not made the truth a demand. He had set it down and walked away and left her to decide what to do with it. In the morning he went to work and rehung a print in the East Corridor that had shifted 2 millimeters in the night. He did not know what would happen next, but he knew how to wait for things that mattered. He had been practicing in one form or another for a very long time. The envelope was still on her kitchen counter. She had not put it there on purpose. She had picked it up from the floor in front of her door on the evening of day 5, carried it inside, set it down next to the dish rack, and then stood in her kitchen for a long time not opening it. Then she had opened it. Then she had set the drawing on the counter and gone to sit on the couch, in the dark with her knees pulled up and the television off, and the apartment doing what apartments did at 11 at night when you were alone in them, being very quiet, being very honest. It had been 5 days since she had answered his message. 5 days since she had looked at his name on her phone and felt that specific thing, that pull in 2 directions at once, toward and away, like standing at the edge of something warm and being convinced, somewhere below the level of conscious thought, that warm things were traps. She knew where that came from. She knew exactly where it came from. She could trace it back like a thread. Solomon's voice in her kitchen when she had told him she was happy. The look on his face, not angry, amused. Like happiness was something only naive people felt, and she had just proven herself one of them. She could trace it back to the evening she had cooked dinner for his colleagues and spent 3 hours being witty and warm, and after everyone left he had told her she had tried too hard. She could trace it to the birthday where she had cried because she was moved by something he gave her, and he had called her performance exhausting. She could trace every reflex back. That was the terrible part. She could see the wiring. She could name every wire. And still her hand would not reach for the thing she wanted. So she sat in the dark. And she read his messages. Not Darius's. She had Darius's message memorized, 4 words. Completely unbearable in their simplicity. She read Solomon's, all 67 of them. Starting from the beginning. The first one was from 2 years ago, the week after the divorce was final. Measured. Concerned sounding. Asking if she was doing okay, framed as care. The kind of framing that only revealed itself when you held it at a certain angle. She read them slowly, and somewhere around message 31 something shifted. Not dramatically. Not the way people described revelations in movies, with light coming through windows and music rising underneath. Just a small, quiet shift. Like a drawer that had always stuck finally sliding open on its own. She was reading a message in Solomon's voice. She had been reading all of them in his voice. His actual voice, Smooth and measured, the voice from the voicemail at Marlowe's. But around message 31, she heard something else under it. Her own voice. Telling her the same things. In the same cadence. With the same precision, too eager, too quick to trust. Too much, too soon, you always do this. She had been delivering his verdicts in her own mouth for 2 years. Not to him. To herself. Every morning, when she looked in the mirror getting ready for work. Every time someone was kind to her and she felt that pull toward it. Every time she wanted something and caught herself wanting it. She had been his best student. The thoughts sat there in the dark apartment. Flat and entirely clear. She had learned the lesson so well she no longer needed the teacher. She set the phone down. She looked at the ceiling. Then she said, out loud to nobody, okay. Just that. No follow-through, no plan, just the word. Like naming the thing was the first requisite step before anything else happened. She got up, went to the kitchen, looked at the drawing on the counter. He had drawn her from the side. She was in a doorway, or rather she was in the space of a doorway, the kind of space you don't notice you're framed by until someone shows you. Her hair was down. Her shoulders were relaxed. She was looking at something outside the frame of the drawing, something that had her full attention. She looked like herself. Not the version of herself she had been performing for years. Not the careful, managed, pre-apologizing version. Just her standing in a corridor looking at something she found worth looking at. She turned it over. I'm still here. She put on her coat. She drove to the museum. She had not called. She had not texted. She told herself she would turn around twice. Once on the highway on-ramp and once at the museum parking lot entrance, and she kept driving both times. Because she was not going there because she was falling apart. She was not going there because she needed rescuing or because the apartment had gotten too quiet or because Solomon's voice was still looping in her head and she needed someone to drown it out. She was going because she wanted to, because she was choosing to, because those were two different things from all the reasons she had gone toward people in the past, and she understood the difference now, in a way that lived in her body and not just her head. The museum was closed and dark from the street, but there was a single light in the upper window on the east side, which meant the roof access door was probably unlocked, which meant he was probably up there. She sat in the parking lot for a moment. Then she got out of the car. The roof access stairwell smelled like old stone and something faintly metallic, industrial, the kind of smell that belonged to places that were serious about being places. She went up 2 flights, pushed through the heavy door. The city opened in front of her. She had forgotten how much of it you could see from here. The river was black and silver below the bridge. The downtown grid lay quiet in both directions, amber-lit and soft at this hour, the hard edges of it dissolved by distance. The sky above was doing something with clouds and moonlight that would have been embarrassing in a painting but was simply true in real life. Darius was sitting on the low ledge near the north railing. Not close enough to the edge to be alarming, just there. Legs out in front of him, jacket on. Looking at the river, the way people looked at things when they were not looking at the thing, but needed something steady to rest their eyes on. He heard the door. He turned. He saw her. He did not say anything. Neither did she for a moment. They just looked at each other in the way that people did when the looking contained most of what needed to be said. Then she crossed the roof and sat down next to him, not close enough to touch, just next to him. Hi, she said. Hi, I read your drawing. Drawings don't usually have text. I read the back of your drawing. Ah, he looked at the river. And I had to come see if it was still true. He was quiet for a moment. It was always going to be true, he said. She looked at the city, the river carrying light away in long, slow pieces. I read his messages tonight, she said. All of them, from the beginning. Okay. I heard something different this time. She paused. I heard myself saying them to myself, using his words. His conclusions, about who I am and what I do and why nothing good is going to last. Another pause. I've been doing that for 2 years. After he left, I kept him around by just doing his job for him. Darius did not look at her. He let her say it to the city. I don't want to do that anymore, she said. Okay, he said again, quieter. I also want to say that I'm sorry for going quiet. For 5 days. You don't owe me. I know I don't owe you. I want to. She turned to look at him. There's a difference. I'm learning to notice the difference. He looked at her then. His face in the rooftop light was open and careful, and carrying that thing it always carried, The thing she had been calling patience but was starting to understand was something more specific than patience. It was the look of someone who had decided a long time ago that she was worth waiting for and had simply been consistent about it without making it her problem. "How are you?" he said. "Tired," she said. "Clearer than I was yesterday. Scared that the clarity won't hold. It doesn't have to hold all at once." "That's easy to say." "It is," he agreed. "I'm saying it anyway." She turned back to the river. They sat there. Not for a dramatic length of time. Just long enough for the city to feel like it was holding them along with everything else it was holding. Long enough for her breathing to slow. Long enough for the particular knot between her shoulder blades to loosen a half turn. Then her phone rang. She knew before she looked. Some part of her body knew. Solomon Price. She looked at the screen, then at Darius. "He's called 3 times tonight," she said. "I declined the others." Darius said nothing. Just waited to see what she would do. She declined this one too. Put the phone face down on the ledge beside her. "He knows when I'm close to feeling okay about something," she said. "It's like a signal. My mood changes and his phone rings. Or he calls constantly and you only notice when the timing is bad." She looked at him. Then she made a face. "That is incredibly reasonable. I have my moments, don't get comfortable." He almost smiled. "Not quite." "What do you want to do?" he said. "About Solomon." "Yes." She looked at the phone on the ledge, at her own face reflected in the dark screen. "I've been not doing something for 2 years," she said. "I've been not answering, not engaging, not responding, but I've also been not finishing it." She paused. "There's a difference between avoidance and a decision." "There is. I think I need to make a decision." She picked up the phone, looked at it for a long moment. Then she opened Solomon's contact, scrolled to his messages. All 67 of them. Selected all. Deleted. Her thumb was steady. "Okay," she said quietly. Then she looked at his contact. His name at the top of the screen. The photo that auto-populated from somewhere. His face looking slightly to the left like he was about to say something and had been caught mid-thought. She blocked the number. It took 4 seconds. She set the phone down. Put both hands in her lap. Breathed out long and slow. "How does that feel?" Darius said. "Like I threw away something I had been carrying so long I forgot it had weight. Good weight or bad weight? The bad kind. The kind you keep because you've convinced yourself that the discomfort is familiar, and familiar means safe." She looked at her hands. It was not safe. "No, I know that now. I knew it before, technically. But knowing something technically and knowing it in your actual body are different things." "They are," he said. "Which one is this?" "Both," she said, finally. And then she tipped sideways and put her head on his shoulder. Not dramatically. Just leaned. The way people leaned when they had been standing up for too long and the shoulder next to them was the right height and there was no performance required. He went still. Then slowly he settled. Not pulling her in, not making it into something. Just letting her be there. They sat with the city below them for a while. And it was enough. It was more than enough. It lasted another week. The quiet, good version of things. Coffee. Long walks in the part of town where the old buildings still had their original brickwork. An afternoon in the museum's storage room where he showed her pieces that had not been on display in decades. A 19th century quilt in a protective case. A hand-carved letterbox with a broken hinge he had been meaning to fix for 3 years. "You're still meaning to fix it," she said. "I'm building up to it. It's a hinge. It's a significant hinge." She gave him a look that he recognized. The look that meant she was filing something away to use later. He was becoming familiar with her filing system. It was extensive. He was also beginning to recognize when something was wrong before she said it. There was a shift on the Thursday of that week. Nothing dramatic. She was quieter at dinner. The answers she gave were shorter. Not cold, but shorter. Like she was dividing her attention with something he couldn't see. He said, at the end of the evening, when she was getting her coat. She stopped. "What?" she said. "Something's there, I'm fine, I know." And something's there, she looked at him, then looked away. "I got a letter," she said. "Not from Solomon, my lawyer. There's a piece of property from the divorce that we never finalized the paperwork on. My lawyer says Solomon has been delaying the transfer for 8 months. She paused. "He's been sitting on a piece of my life for 8 months and I didn't know." Darius kept his face steady. "He still has a key," she said then. Her voice had gone very quiet. "To my apartment. I changed most of them. But the spare I gave to the building manager 2 years ago, Solomon knows where it is. I never thought to, I didn't think he would. She stopped. Do you feel safe there, he said. I think so. Then I don't know. Okay, he said. Okay, what? Okay, so we deal with it. Darius, it's 11 at night. The key situation we can deal with tomorrow, the feeling safe situation we can deal with right now. He looked at her directly. Do you want me to come with you? To my apartment? Yes. She looked uncertain. Not of him. Of something else. That feels like a lot. It's not a lot. It's practical, you're unsettled. I'm not going to pretend you're not so that I don't make things awkward. She studied him. You would just come. And what? Make sure the lock works. Say goodnight. Drive home. That's very undramatic. I'm a very undramatic person. She made a face. Then she said okay. They drove separately the way they always did, because separate cars were still important. Because choices were still important. Because she was still the one deciding the speed, and he was still the one who understood that, and did not require her to explain it. He followed her taillights across town. Her building was a walk-up on a quiet street with a hardware store on the corner that closed at 8 and a laundromat next to it that was still lit and still running. A couple of machines going in the yellow light of the window. She unlocked the building door. He held it. They went up. Her apartment was on the 2nd floor. She got her keys out before they reached her door. Reached for the lock. The door was already open, not swung wide. Just. Not latched. The frame had not caught. She stopped. Darius put his hand on her arm, very lightly, not gripping, just there. Stay here, he said. She did not stay there. She followed him in. The apartment was quiet. The lights were off. Nothing overturned, nothing broken. No sign of anything except a window in the kitchen that was open an inch that she said she had not left open. And in the center of the kitchen counter, a single piece of paper. Solomon's handwriting. She recognized it before she got close enough to read it. The particular pressure of his pen. The way he wrote with the kind of certainty that never second-guessed itself. She picked it up. Darius watched her read it. Her face did not collapse. It did something more complicated than collapse. It steadied. Like a person who had been braced for something for a long time, and had finally felt the impact and discovered they were still standing. She set the paper down. He says he wants to talk, she said. He says I've been making impulsive decisions and he thinks we should discuss the property issue in person. He says he let himself in because he was worried about me. She paused. He used the word concerned. 3 times. Darius looked at the paper, then at the window. He was here, he said. He was in my apartment, she said, without asking, without calling. He used the key I didn't know he still had access to, walked into my apartment and left a note on my counter telling me he was concerned. Silence. I'm not afraid, she said. And her voice was doing that thing from Marlowe's. That specific evenness. The voice of someone who had found solid ground in themselves and was standing on it. I want to be clear about that. I'm not afraid. She stopped. I'm done. What do you need, he said. She looked at him. And then she said something he had not expected. I need you to stay, she said. Not because I can't handle this. I can handle this. I need you to stay because I am about to handle this and I want someone here who sees me doing it. He looked at her for a moment. I'm not going anywhere, he said. She nodded. Once. She got out her phone. She called Solomon. He answered on the 2nd ring. Of course he did. Celeste, he said. Warm. Unsurprised. Like she was calling exactly when expected. You were in my apartment, she said. I was worried. You haven't been. You were in my apartment without my permission, she said. That's a fact. The rest of what you say is your version of why. I'm not interested in your version of why. A pause. Then smoother. You're upset. I'm clear, she said. Those are different things. She took a breath. Not to compose herself. She was already composed. To make sure the next thing landed exactly right. I'm changing my locks tomorrow. I'm instructing my lawyer to finalize the property transfer through legal channels with no further direct contact from you to me. And I am telling you now clearly, so there is no confusion. You are not welcome in this apartment, in my workplace, or in my life. What we had is done. It has been done. And I am done waiting for you to catch up to that fact. Another pause. Longer this time. Then his voice dropped the warmth and went somewhere else. The underneath voice. The real temperature. You're going to regret this, he said. You always do this. You get comfortable and then you blow it up. Goodbye, Solomon, she said. She ended the call. She stood in her kitchen. in the low light with the open window and the laundromat sounds coming up from the street, and she was shaking. Not from fear, not from grief. From the particular adrenaline of having said the exact right thing in exactly the right way and meant every word of it. Darius was still at the edge of the kitchen. He had not moved, he had not said anything. He had been there, quiet, exactly as asked. She looked at him. "How was that?" she said. "Clear," he said. "Complete. Accurate. My knees are vibrating again. Same reason as last time. They're applauding." "That's what I said." She laughed. It came up from somewhere deep and came out bright and a little broken and entirely real. She pressed her hand to her sternum, like she was checking whether something had shifted in there. Something had. She crossed the kitchen. She walked to him, and she put her arms around him, not falling into him, not collapsing, just wrapping her arms around him with the same deliberateness with which she did everything else now. Choosing it. All the way choosing it. He put his arms around her, and they stood in her kitchen in the dark with the window open, and the machines turning in the laundromat below, and the city going about its ordinary business all around them. He did not say anything. He did not need to. She stayed that way for a while, breathing, just breathing. Then she said against his jacket, "You should probably go home." "Probably. You have work tomorrow?" "I do. Devon will have opinions about the thermostat, he always does." She pulled back, looked up at him. Her eyes were dry, clear, a little bright around the edges in the way that did not mean sadness. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For knowing when to be present and when to be quiet. Those are two different skills, and most people only have one." He looked at her for a long moment, the way he had been looking at her, in one form or another for a long time. "I'll text you when I get home," he said. "I'll be up." He left. She double-locked the door behind him, stood in the hallway inside her apartment. Then she walked through every room and checked every window and turned on every light she wanted on and left off every light she didn't need. Made herself chamomile tea. Stood at the kitchen counter drinking it. The drawing was still on the counter, her in the doorway, looking at something worth looking at. She turned it face up. She had been the woman in that drawing for a long time without knowing it. Standing in doorways looking at things. Being seen from a distance by someone who was patient enough to wait. She thought about what it would mean to step through the doorway. Not fall through. Not be pushed. Not stumble. Just walk through. All the way through. Into whatever was on the other side. She thought it was probably going to be worth it. She finished her tea. Washed the cup. Put it away. Changed all 4 locks the next morning before 9. Did not look back. The morning after she changed her locks, Celeste slept until 8, which does not sound significant, except that she had not slept past 6 in 2 years. Not once. Because 6 was when Solomon used to get up and make noise, and the noise would wake her, and the waking would come with that immediate inventory. What is his mood? What did I do yesterday? What might be required of me today? The inventory happened before she was fully conscious. It had been so automatic that even after the divorce it continued. 6 o'clock, eyes open, body already apologizing for things it had not yet done. Not that morning. That morning she woke at 8 and lay still for a moment trying to understand what was different. The light in the room was the wrong angle. The apartment was quiet in a different way than it usually was. And then she realized. She was not afraid of the quiet. She was just in it, the way you were in weather, without it meaning anything about her. She got up and made coffee and stood at the kitchen window, watching the street below. A man walked a dog. A woman with a bright orange coat waited at the bus stop on her phone. 2 deliverymen argued cheerfully about parking. Ordinary, all of it ordinary. She drank her coffee. She called her lawyer at 9 and gave specific instructions about the property transfer. No further direct contact from Solomon. All communication through legal channels. Her voice was steady the whole time. Her hand did not shake. She texted Darius at 9:30. Not because she needed anything. Just because she wanted to. He replied in 4 minutes, which told her he had been awake for a while. Probably since 6. Working. Or thinking. Or both, which with Darius usually looked like the same thing. The text said, "Devon has already complained about the thermostat. It is 7 degrees lower than yesterday. I have not touched it." She laughed out loud in her kitchen, alone. And that was fine. That was more than fine. The weeks that followed were quiet in the way good things were quiet. Not empty. Not the silence of someone holding their breath. The quiet of two people learning the specific weight of each other's company. The particular sounds of someone else in a space. The way Darius set down a coffee cup differently than she expected. The way she organized her things in a way that had a logic he took 3 days to decode and then found elegant. Small things. Accumulating. He met her after work on Tuesdays. Not because they had scheduled it. Because Tuesday was when her longest sessions ran back to back, and by 5 o'clock she was carrying other people's voices in her throat and needed to come back to her own. He started showing up at the corner near the school at 5:15 with 2 cups from the place she liked. Not always. Just often enough that it became a thing without either of them naming it. She started keeping a spare set of his keys on her counter. Not because it was required. Because he was in and out often enough that it made sense, and she liked seeing them there. The first real fight happened on a Wednesday in November. Nothing dramatic had led to it. That was the worst part. Or maybe the most honest part. It was just a regular Wednesday. She had had a hard day. One of her students had regressed, and she was taking it personally in the way she took all her work personally, and she knew she was doing it but could not stop. She was tired. She was snapping at small things. Darius was making dinner in her kitchen, which was a thing he did now, and she said something sharp about the way he had reorganized her cabinet to make space for the skillet he used most. He put down the spatula. He turned around. "What's actually wrong?" he said. "Nothing's wrong. That's not true. Can you not do that?" "Do what?" "The thing where you see through what I say to what I mean. It's exhausting." He looked at her. Then he said, very evenly, "You're asking me not to pay attention to you. I'm asking you to let me be in a bad mood without making it a project. I'm not making it a project. I asked one question. You always ask one question, and the question always implies that I'm not dealing with something correctly." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'm not Solomon." The kitchen went very still. She heard it land, felt it land, in the specific place where it was true, and where it was also not entirely fair, and where both of those things were happening simultaneously, which was the most honest version of a complicated moment. "I know that," she said. Quieter. "You just told me that paying attention to you is exhausting," he said. "I need you to understand that is not a small thing to say to me." She looked at him. His face was not angry, not cold. It was the face of a person who had been hurt and was being honest about it, which was worse somehow, which required more from her than anger would have. "You're right," she said. "That wasn't fair. It wasn't. I'm sorry." He picked up the spatula, turned back to the stove. The silence between them had a different texture now. Not hostile. Processing. "I had a bad day," she said to his back. "I know. One of my students is struggling and I'm taking it personally. I know that too." She came and stood beside him at the stove. Not touching. Just near. "I don't know how to be in a relationship where someone actually pays attention," she said. "I know that sounds absurd, but I don't. I was in one for 4 years where the attention was conditional and corrective. And now you just see things, and sometimes I don't know what to do with being seen." He was quiet for a moment, stirring. "I don't know how to be with someone who still flinches sometimes when I'm kind," he said. Not accusatory. Just true. "I know why you do. I know where it comes from. But there are moments when I don't know if I'm doing something wrong or if you're just still finding your way back. And I wait because I don't want to push. But sometimes the waiting feels like..." He stopped. "Like what?" she said. "Like standing in a corridor hoping someone will notice you're there." She looked at his profile. That specific thing in his face. "You've been standing in corridors for a long time," she said softly. "I've been fine with it, I know. But you shouldn't have to be." He turned to look at her. And there it was again. That open, careful thing. The look that had not changed in 15 years, from the hallway outside history class to this kitchen on a Wednesday in November. "I'm not asking for anything you can't give," he said. "I just want you to talk to me when something's there. Not manage it before I can see it. Not..." He paused again. "I want to be in it with you. Not handed the finished version after you've already dealt with it alone." She looked at him. Something settled in her chest. Not perfectly. Not without effort. But with the specific weight of something true. "Okay," she said. "Okay. I'll try, that's all I'm asking." She took the spatula out of his hand. He let her. "You were overcooking the onions," she said. "I was giving them depth, you were burning them. Depth is adjacent to burning." She made a sound that was mostly not a laugh. They finished making dinner together. Bumped into each other in the small kitchen. Did not apologize for it. ate at the table without the television on. And that was what it looked like. The actual inside of something real. Not always easy, not always graceful, but with the door left open and no one sleeping in the hallway. She went to therapy for the first time in December. She had considered it before, multiple times, but there had always been a reason to wait. She was fine. She was managing. She was better than she had been. And underneath all of those things, the reason she did not say out loud. She was not sure she trusted her own perception of herself enough to describe it to a stranger. That was the thing Solomon had taken. Not her confidence exactly. Her certainty. Her ability to be a reliable narrator of her own experience. She sat in the first session and told the therapist that. Almost exactly that. In those words. Without having planned to say it. The therapist, a woman named Dr. Darius Okafor, with an office full of natural light, and a way of sitting that suggested she had all the time there was, said that's very precise. Most people take several sessions to get to that. I help people find words for things, Celeste said. I just usually do it for other people. How does it feel to do it for yourself? She thought about that, like using a muscle I haven't used in a long time, she said. Sore, but the right kind. She went back the next week, and the week after that. She did not tell Darius for the first month. Not because she was hiding it, because it was hers. Because some things needed to be yours before they could be shared. And when she finally mentioned it, over coffee on a Sunday morning while he was reading something on his phone, and she was looking at the rain on the window, she said it the way people said things that had already been decided. I've been seeing a therapist, she said, since December. He looked up. How is it? He said. Hard. Good both. Good, he said. Not in a performative way. Just good. Like it was the obvious right response and required nothing more than that. She went back to her window and her coffee. He went back to his phone, and that was enough. Spring came in the way spring came in this part of the city. Sudden and not quite believable. One week the trees were bare, and the next week they were doing something aggressive with blossoms, and everyone on the street looked slightly caught off guard by the warmth. Celeste bought a new couch in April. Darius helped her move the old one out and the new one in on a Saturday morning. Devon, who was apparently also available on weekends for a reasonable amount of bribery involving food, appeared with a pickup truck and strong opinions about the correct angle for navigating a second-floor landing. 45 degrees, Devon said. It needs to be 60, Darius said. I have been moving furniture for 20 years, and this couch has a non-standard arm width. It is a couch. Celeste stood in the stairwell watching them argue about geometry, and felt something that she would not have been able to name 6 months ago, but could name now. Safe. Not the absence of danger. The presence of something else. People who would argue about couch angles on a Saturday morning because they were in her life and in her stairwell, and that was simply what her life looked like now. The couch made it up at approximately 53 degrees, which Darius said vindicated him and Devon said proved nothing. They ordered food after. All three of them on the new couch that was too wide for the space and perfect for it at the same time. Devon told a story about a previous moving incident involving a disassembled bookcase and a parking enforcement officer that got increasingly implausible as it went. Celeste laughed until her face hurt. Darius looked at her laughing. He looked at her the way he always looked at her. She caught him at it. What? She said. Nothing, he said. You're doing the thing. I don't have a thing. You have a thing. You look at me like you're doing math. He considered this. I'm not doing math. What are you doing? He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, simply checking what? That you're okay. Devon, who had been eating quietly and had the good manners to look at his food during this conversation, said, You are both very earnest and I respect it. The anniversary of that Friday night at Marlowe's came in late October. Celeste knew it was coming. She had known for weeks. She had not said anything because she was not sure what to say. It felt too large to acknowledge directly and too significant to let pass without noticing. As it turned out, Darius had also known. He texted her the week before and said, I'd like to take you to dinner at Marlowe's on Friday, if you want. She looked at the text for a long time. She typed yes. Then she put the phone down and sat with that for a while. The last time she had been at Marlowe's, she had been smoothing a napkin for 47 minutes trying to make herself look like a woman who was fine. She had been afraid that a room full of strangers would see through her. She had been managing the distance between who she was and who she was trying to perform being. She was not afraid now. She was something else. She was the person who had done all the work between that night and this one. She was the person who had stood in her kitchen and ended a phone call and changed her locks. Who had sat in a bright office and found words for things she had stopped believing she could accurately name. Who had argued in a kitchen and stayed in the room and let herself be known imperfectly. She was going to walk back into that restaurant and she was going to be all of that at once. She wore a different dress. Not green. Deep burgundy. Fitted, same silhouette, same deliberateness. Her hair straight and smooth. She stood at the mirror before leaving and looked at herself for a long moment, not checking, not managing, just looking. This was her face. This was what she looked like. That was enough. More than enough. Darius was already at the restaurant when she arrived. He was at table 7, the one near the back wall, the one he had been sitting at a year ago when she had crossed a room and asked if she could sit down. He stood when she walked in. His face when he saw her did that thing. The thing she had stopped pretending she didn't love. She walked to the table. She sat down across from him. "Hi," she said. "Hi, you're at the same table. Table 7. That's intentional, very." She looked around the restaurant. Same piano near the bar. Same soft lighting, same warm hum of people. Different in every way that mattered. Trevor appeared. He was wearing a badge now, manager. It was silver and slightly crooked on his lapel, and his face, when he saw them, was the face of a man who had been waiting for this specific moment. "I wondered if you'd come back," he said. "You remember us," Celeste said. "I remember everyone," he said. "But especially you two." He paused. "That was a significant night." "For us too," Darius said. Trevor set down the menus. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and produced a small candle, the kind with a broad base. He set it on the table between them and lit it without a word. Then he stepped back. "On the house," he said. "The candle and whatever you'd like to start with." He disappeared. Celeste looked at the candle, then at Darius. Her eyes had gone soft around the edges. "He remembered the candle," she said. "He remembers everything. That's either comforting or alarming. Little both." She smiled, picked up her menu, set it back down. "I'm not actually looking at the menu," she said. "Neither am I. What are you doing?" "Looking at you." She held his gaze. "You can say things like that now. We've established this. I know. I'm still getting used to being allowed." Something in her chest moved. "You've always been allowed," she said. She stopped. "I was still learning." We both were. She reached across the table, put her hand over his. The same gesture from a year ago in this same room. Except a year ago her hand had been cold and her fingers had been shaking and she had been asking for performance. And now her hand was warm and steady. And this was not performance. This was just the truth of where they were. They had dinner. Real dinner this time. Not the distracted, adrenaline-weighted version of last year. They talked about her students and his work and Devon's ongoing feud with the building's HVAC system. They ordered dessert. Would you treat them with kindness? Shared it without discussing whether they were sharing it, which was the kind of thing that only happened when two people had been around each other long enough for that to be automatic. The piano played something slow. The restaurant breathed around them. And then Darius said, "I want to show you something." His voice had changed, not dramatically. But she knew his voice in all its registers now, and this one was different. Careful. Like he was carrying something breakable. She looked at him. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He set something on the table between them, a ticket stub. Small, slightly yellowed at the edges. The kind of thing that should have been thrown away immediately, but had instead traveled through the years in the pocket of a wallet, and then a jacket, and then another wallet, carried without deliberate intention, but also never discarded. She looked at it. Then she picked it up. It was a ticket stub from a community arts exhibition. She could read the date even though the ink had faded. The name of the museum. She looked up at him. "That's from," she started. "The exhibition," he said. "The community portraits one, when we were 22. She looked at the ticket stub in her hand, at the faded date, at the edges worn soft from years of contact. "You kept this," she said. "I found it in my wallet about 6 months after the exhibition. I didn't know why I had kept it. I didn't remember making the decision to keep it." He paused. "I almost threw it away a dozen times. It didn't make sense to keep a ticket stub from a random exhibition." Another pause. "But I never did." She was looking at the ticket stub. "And then you told me you were there," he said, "at Bellwether. You mentioned it and he stopped. I went home that night and I looked for it. I didn't know if I still had it. I went through 3 boxes before I found it. She looked up at him. You kept it? She said again. I think, he said slowly, that I kept it because some part of me knew that day mattered. I didn't know why. I didn't know what it was the beginning of. I just couldn't get rid of it. She looked at the ticket stub. Then she looked at him. Her eyes were full, not the way they had been full a year ago in this same restaurant. Not the full of someone barely holding the surface of something together. The full of someone who was completely solid and also completely moved. And those two things could coexist, and that was new. That was something she had learned in the year between. Darius, she said. I'm not finished, he said. She waited. He looked at her with the specific steadiness of someone who has been rehearsing the right version of something for a while, and has decided to say it in the plainest possible words, because plainness was what he had always been and she deserved the real version. I have been in love with you, he said, in one form or another, for a very long time. Not the way I was when I was young. That was real, but it was also incomplete. The way young things are. What I have now is different. It's specific. It's you specifically. The way you correct yourself mid-sentence when you realize something landed wrong. The way you talk about your work like it's the most important thing in the world, which it is. The way you walked into that restaurant a year ago alone and walked out of it with your head up and your voice steady. The way you stood in your kitchen and said goodbye to something that had been making you small for years. He stopped, looked at the ticket stub on the table between them. I don't have a ring. I have this. A ticket stub from a day when you walked through a corridor and didn't know I was there. And now you know I'm here. And I would like— He stopped again. His voice had dropped. I would like very much for you to keep knowing. The restaurant was doing what restaurants did, existing around them, unaware. Trevor was absolutely aware. He was at the bar on the far side of the room, and he was very carefully pretending to look at a glass he was polishing. Celeste looked at Darius for a long time. Long enough that any other man might have gotten nervous. But Darius was not any other man, and he had already proven he knew how to wait for things. Darius Webb, she said finally, yes. You kept a ticket stub for 10 years because you couldn't throw it away. I did. That is the most you thing I have ever heard. Is that a problem? No. She was crying now. Not the barely holding it together kind. The kind that came when you were completely solid and completely moved and the combination needed somewhere to go. She pressed her fingers under her eyes. You absolute man. Is that a yes? It is very much a yes. He exhaled. Slow. Like he had been holding that breath for a long time. Maybe for longer than this conversation. She reached across the table, took his hand. The same hand she had taken a year ago in this room when she was cold and shaking and asking for pretend. Her hand was warm now, completely steady. I love you, she said, because it had been true for a while, and she was done waiting for the perfect moment. The perfect moment was a fiction, and this moment was real, and she was choosing it. I love you, he said back. Like it was easy. Like it had always been the answer to the question. Because for him it had been. Trevor arrived at the table. He set down 2 glasses of champagne. He did not say they were on the house. They were clearly on the house. He did not make a speech. He simply set the glasses down and looked at them both with the expression of a man who had been waiting to be a small chapter in someone's love story for an entire year. Congratulations, he said. Then he left. Celeste looked at the champagne, at the candle, at the ticket stub still on the table between them, at the man across from her who had carried a piece of a day they had both been part of, separately without knowing, until the night she had crossed a room and asked if she could sit down. I want to say something, she said. Okay. A year ago I sat in this restaurant for 47 minutes and I was ashamed of wanting something. I was ashamed of hoping. I had spent so long being told that my wanting was excessive that I had started to perform not wanting, to pre-cancel things before they could be taken away. She looked at him. And then you were there, and you were so quiet about it. Not in a withholding way. In the way of a person who understood that the kindest thing was sometimes just to not make something bigger than it needed to be. You did the same for me, he said. I was a mess. You were honest, he said. Which is what I needed. Somebody being actually honest instead of fine. She shook her head slowly. We wasted a lot of time, she said. We got here, he said. That's what counts. When people ask how we got together, I'm going to say I got stood up at a restaurant. And I'm going to say it was the best empty chair I ever saw. She looked at him. This man who fixed broken things for a living and never needed to be thanked for it. who had drawn her face from memory and left it in front of her door without asking for anything back, who had stood in her kitchen in the dark when she needed a witness and had been exactly that and nothing more, who had kept a ticket stub for 10 years because some part of him already knew. "Take me home," she said. "Your car is here. I know. Walk me to it." He paid before she could discuss it, not to prove anything, just because the night deserved to end without negotiation. Outside the air was cool and clean, the street shining after an earlier rain, their reflections side by side in the dark window of the building across the street, her in burgundy, him in his good jacket, both of them looking like people who had come through something and were standing on the other side of it. He walked her to her car. She stood at the door. "So," she said, "so we're engaged, with a ticket stub." "With a ticket stub." She looked up at him. "I would not have it any other way." He smiled then, full, unguarded, the smile she had been earning slowly, one ordinary moment at a time, the smile that was not performance and not comfort and not management. Just him, completely. She kissed him. There in the parking lot outside Marlowe's on the anniversary of the night, she had sat alone for 47 minutes and decided she was done being invisible. No rain this time. No music from inside leaking through the glass. Just the ordinary sounds of a city on a Friday night and two people standing in a parking lot with their whole lives in front of them. When they finally pulled back, she looked at him for a moment. "You should have talked to me sooner," she said. "Back then. In school. I know. Years, Darius. I know. We could have, I know." He looked at her. "But you know what we also would have missed." She thought about it. All of it. The 47 minutes. The cold hand across the table. The voicemail in the cafe. The drawing on the counter. The locked door that she opened herself. The kitchen argument and the space they held for each other through it. The therapist's office in the morning light. The new couch at 53 degrees. All of it. Every bit of it. The whole winding, hard, necessary way here. "I wouldn't trade it," she said. "No," he said, "neither would I." She got in her car. He watched her taillights until they turned the corner. Then he stood in the parking lot for a moment under the wide, quiet sky of a city that had no idea what had just happened at table 7, smiled to himself, and went to get his own car because that was how it went. Not in a sweep of music and perfect light, but in the ordinary way of two people who had found each other, lost time, and then found each other again with enough scars and enough sense to know what they had and hold it. Not too tight, just right.